Welcome, guys. Today I'm going to be talking about, in positive psychology for my presentation, the meaningful life, the pleasant life, and the good life. The PowerPoints are relatively short because I'm discussing um, majority of the points and what goes along with it. They're also short just to give you some visual things to look at, like the meaningful life. And I think one quote that really stands out to me for the meaningful life is what Martin Seligman said: using your signature strengths and virtues in the service of something much larger than you are. So the meaningful life is not just discovering your purpose, values, efficacy, and self-worth, but it's also to do with studying your character, not necessarily things that pleasure you, which is a pleasant life, and we'll go on to that. So we're going to start with purpose. For purpose, it's basically present events. This is the words of Marcel. And present events draw meaning from their connection to future outcomes, objective goals, and subjective fulfillment. And then there's values, of course, which will justify certain courses of action. And of course, there's efficacy, which is the belief that one can make a difference. And lastly, self-worth, reasons for believing that one is a good and worthy person. And that's extremely important. If you're going to live the meaningful life, you have to make sure that you believe you are worthy enough to live the meaningful life. And if you don't believe that you're worthy enough to live a meaningful life, then you won't be happy. Because the point of meaningful life, and majority of these lives, is you to be happy at. I would say you to be happy at the end of the day. So, um, again, it's marked by purpose and meaning. And then the people ask, like, how can we aim for a meaningful life? But the one thing we need to do is first take a moment to reflect on our strengths and virtues, like the best things about you. Like, we don't ask questions like, what are we good at? What are your natural talents? What are the virtues that you have deliberately cultivated in yourself? And then you have to ask yourself, like, a bigger question. Can you think of a cause bigger than yourself that is truly worth serving? Is it a political party, social justice agenda, your faith, environment? Like, it's not just focusing on yourself. It's just you being able to make a difference in the world, and you want to be able to, how do I say, fulfill that difference and make it so that that difference impacts the world in some way. So now we're going to move on to the next one, which is rather interesting. So now we're going to go to the good life, which, as we see here, the good life is all about meaning and flow. And as I mean for that is you're focusing on specifically, like, it kind of gets construed for meaning, the meaningful life, but it's kind of not, because you're focusing on your work, loved ones, friendships, leisure, and parenting, and you want to basically spend more times with your values. That's the good life. While the meaningful life is you're spending time with your values, but you're trying to make an impact in the world. So, like, the good life is, you're just focusing on your values, not necessarily like your pleasure. So, like, whether it's hanging out with you want to keep your friendships, you're a parent and you want to make sure that, your kids are fed, they go to school, and you focus on specifically your values. And in my opinion, um, this may seem like the most important life to live, but I don't think it's the best life to live for your happiness. And I know how to elaborate for the meaningful life and quite on that, but I'll go back to that. The meaningful life, I believe, is a really good life to live because you're focusing on multiple things and making an impact in the world. I feel like that would naturally make someone happy. Now let's go back to the good life. I think it's the worst life to live for your pleasure, but it's also the best life to live for value-wise. So the reason why is, say for example, is you're just focusing on your values, but you're not living any pleasure. I have many friends that throughout high school that would just focus on doing schoolwork, and then going to school, they go home, they do homework, they eat dinner with their parents, and then they of course they got straight A's. But there was one of my really good friends, Nick. He would do that every day, and he get straight A's. And then I would see, like, he's upset a lot of the time. Like, why are you upset? Because I'm just doing homework and getting like A's and blah and all this, but he doesn't have any time to hang out with friends, and he's not fully happy. while I'm at school, I'm not saying I was half-assing, but I was getting like, I was getting like B's and A's and like 1C, but I was able to hang out with friends and I was completely happy because I wasn't focusing 100% on school. Of course, I was studying, but I was being able to value um, other things in life besides that. And I think that's a really important thing we need to focus on. It's not just, focusing on just living the good life and just settle just for values and all that, because in the end of the day, yes, it's important to settle for values, but you need to do more than that in order to succeed in life. Because your mental health, to my opinion, is number one. So let's move on to the next life. So the pleasant life. This one I find the most interesting because this is, to me, considered one of the easy way out lives, because you're always going to be experiencing pleasure and nonstop. Like like it says in here, your happiness with the present. You have optimism about the future. You have you're dealing with the past. It's all about past, present, and future. But the one thing that about the pleasant life is that it's all about like what experiences pleasure. Like, whether it's like gaming or you like to play basketball, you like to watch sports. Like, say you're addicted to like Fortnite, for example. You're just playing Fortnite and that's just making you happy. Like, you do everything that just makes you happy. So it's kind of like the exact opposite in a way of like the good life in certain ways, because that's you're focusing on values rather than pleasure. That's you're focusing on pleasure rather than values. So if there's any way you combine the good life and pleasant life together, that would be the most ideal life. It's also one of the hardest because to experience pleasure, in my opinion, what I've learned, experience pleasure and values, and you put them together, it's actually really stressful because uh, you're trying to cram everything in together, and that just almost seems like impossible to do. Like, in your mind, you're like, how can I cram in pleasure and values together? Well, in my opinion, this is going to be kind of an advice thing, which I've learned, because first off, this has been the most interesting topic I've learned, because it makes you really open your eyes on what type of lives we live, because some of us live the pleasant life or the good life or meaningful life without us realizing it, in my personal opinion. Like, we don't realize we're living this. Anyways, to go back to that is, in my opinion, the best way to try to combine all these together is to map it out. Like, map out your days. That may seem kind of like corny and all that, but like, say like, oh, one day, one day you do your homework, the next day, you can play video games with your friends, or go, like for me, go to Buffalo with my friends, watch sports, play Madden with them, and then the next day, you can easily, sorry, I yawned a little, you can easily just do your homework, and the best thing to do with this is make sure you do your homework early, never procrastinate, and I think all these, at the end of the day, there is not one. Because I was trying to think, what's the best life? But there isn't one best life. It depends on each person. This is more like of different lives, and there technically is not one best life. There's only one best life if you try to combine at least one or two of them together, because every single life of these has flaws. Like, every single life. Because if you do, so the problem is about the meaningful life, because I didn't really go back to that, is you're focusing on stuff bigger than you, but you don't have time to focus on yourself and your pleasures. The good life, you just focusing on values, not your pleasures. Pleasant life, focusing on your pleasures and not necessarily your important values. So lastly, at the end of the day, I think what I learned a lot from this segment and Martin Seligman is the best way to do it is try to combine them in as many ways as possible, not just specifically live one. Specifically live one, at the end of the day, you will not be fully happy. And I think the point in life is to be, you don't need to be fully happy, but you should be happy. And you should be, while you're happy, you should be successful at the same time and not try to fake being happy. So that's what I truly believe. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys did great in your presentation. Have a good rest of the semester.